Hello and welcome to How to Edit a Podcast, or at the very least, How Nathan Edits a Podcast. I've got two different tracks. Well, first of all, what I've got here is a free program called Audacity. It's available on Windows, it's available for Mac, it's probably even Linux or Linux, whatever, and then whatever the other one is. Audacity, right? Download it. What I've got is two different tracks. One is, the top one here is my recording via my microphone, and the second is sort of a digital recording of the other end of a Skype phone call. So for extra inch listeners, this is my audio and this is Windy and Bardi's audio. Because of the way I've recorded it, it's already synced up. Normally, one of the first things I would have to do is I would have to line it up. That is the way it has come as for me. Something to notice is how sort of neat and packaged and also quiet this one is compared to the top one, which is more of the raw feed. So because I, again, did this over Skype, a lot of the processes I'm about to apply to the top track have already been automatically applied to the bottom track for me. And things like Skype and Zoom and Discord and whatever else are going to automatically do for me. But let's start with this top track. The first thing I want to do is I want to gather a noise profile. So I'm going to zoom in to the beginning here, and I want to zoom in really close because I'm only after sort of 2 or 3 seconds. What I want, and what you're going to hopefully hear, is just some light rumbling and breathing and sort of room noise.
And our tactics guy...
Oh, except that I need to mute the other track first. Let's try that again. So that you can vaguely hear me breathing in, and there's just sort of vague room rushings. I'm actually going to unhighlight the breathing in. You can't really hear it. There's sort of a light hum, but what you can do is you can see here in the top right hand corner that it's picking up some vague semblance of noise. Not going to capture that just yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a limiter on. What a limiter is, it brings down the maximum volume, right? You see how there's all of these like quiet bits and then loud bits, and then there are little peaks. Most of these peaks will be where I've gone put or next to the microphone and it's really picked up the noise, or I've started a sentence, because we tend to get louder at the start of sentences and then sort of drift off. So I'm going to apply a limiter, and that's going to do a couple of things. Okay, so it's a hard limit with 0 input gain in either channel. This is gonna be quite heavy. I'm probably, because this is already quite loud, I'm probably going to limit this to -5. It's got a 3.5 millisecond hold, and I am going to apply makeup gain. What that's going to do is it's going to make, instead of bringing the loudest bit down, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to bring the quietest bits up. This is very similar to a compressor, and I'm going to run a compressor as well. Okay, as you can see, the quiet bits have got louder. Now on top of this, I'm going to run a compressor as well. Actually, I'm going to do that now. So into my compressor, threshold is at -19, noise floor is -25, the ratio is 2:1, and I've got the attack and release times way down. I'm going to invite it to make up. Don't need to do that, and I'm going to compress based on peak. So again, it's like the limiter, but I'm just going to repeat this process, and again we're going to keep getting towards this more consistent level of volume throughout whenever I'm speaking. Okay, so we now have everything compressed, and what that's given us is, again, yes, this more consistent volume here whenever I'm talking. Instead of like really loud and then really quiet and really loud and really quiet, it's more of a consistent level of volume. At the moment, things are going beyond maximum volume into the distortion realm, but that is rescuable. Before we do that, we're going to capture a noise profile. So we're going to go back to where we were earlier, except I'm having trouble with my mouse. And we're going to capture the same kind of space we did earlier, but we're going to hear the difference, I think, right about now. Yeah, so you can hear the sound of life, the distant sounds of life. You can hear some traffic on the road. You can hear breathing. You can hear me fidgeting about in my seat like I am just now. You can hear sort of electronical fuzz. And this is consistent throughout the entire recording of my microphone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that profile. I'm going to go into Effects and Noise Reduction. I'm going to click Get Noise Profile. What that's going to do is it's going to record a bunch of information about the frequencies involved in that sound. Then I can re-highlight the entire track instead of just that little bit. Go back into noise reduction, and this time we're going to be doing step 2. So select all of the audio. Noise reduction, I'm going to reduce it by 10 decibels. I could probably do a little more. I might reduce it by 14. Sensitivity is 6, and I'm going to use 3 smoothing bands, and I'm going to reduce. So what that's going to do, it's taken the profile of the frequencies which we've highlighted as the bad ones, and it's going to decrease those frequencies consistently throughout the entire lengthy track. Okay, so as you can see, a lot of the quiet bits, or what should be quiet bits, are kind of back to being quiet bits again, but there's more we can do. Again, we're still beyond maximum volume with the limiter and the compressor applied. Before we just decrease the volume in total, we're going to continue to reduce specific parts of the volume. And this is actually something that I'm going to apply to both tracks in this instance. I'm going to do is I'm going to apply first off a high pass filter and then a low pass filter. So we've cut off the middle frequencies that we don't like. We're going to cut off the highest frequencies and the lowest frequencies, which are outside of the range of the human voice, or at least towards the extremities. So we're going to do a high pass filter. It's going to start off at 150 Hertz, moving down towards lower numbers, and it's going to roll off at 6 decibels per octave. So this is going to cut out all of the sort of low wobble noises underneath the frequency of our voice. Okay, and then the same again for the low pass. Low pass meaning everything lower than this passes. Right, we're going to start off at 5.5K, going upwards in frequency numbers, and we're going to roll off at 6 decibels per octave. So now what I want to do is just take out the last few little bits of where I want it to be quiet. It's going to be quiet. So I'm going to highlight the track, and I'm going to apply a noise gate. Now this isn't something that comes with Audacity automatically. This is something, or sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. I think it depends on the operating system and maybe the version. But you might have to look up how to install the noise gate plugin. But this is the one that I have. So it's a gate. If these are mono tracks, but if it was stereo, they would be linked. I'm not going to apply the low cutoff filter because I've already done that manually. I'm going to reduce it by 30 decibels roughly. I'm going to start bringing it in around 40 decibels roughly, and I'm going to have a fairly slow attack decay. What this is for like if I start a word quietly and build into it, or if I start a word loudly and back off from it, I want a bit of time so that it doesn't cut my word in half. Because sometimes we speak at a low volume that is the same sound that we want to be cutting out when we're not meant to be speaking because we're breathing heavily, or we shuffle in a chair or whatever, things like that. Now I didn't actually need to do any of that, because what I've done is I've created this sort of playlist of actions as a macro. So what I did is I went into macros, I created a new thing called basic track treating, and I used the limiters with the most recent settings that I've applied to them, and I made them a list. So now it does all of that automatically for me. Now that's after quite a bit of time knowing what kind of level I record at, knowing what kind of levels I want to apply. That might not be something that you want to do straight away. You might want to sort of keep doing it manually for a while until you're happy with your settings. And even then, sometimes I'm still going to have to tweak things around because no two recordings are the same. So now I've got this track where, yeah, most of the quiet bits are quiet. The loud bits are at a relatively consistent volume, so it's not jumping all over the place, but it's still peaking beyond max volume. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight that track, go into effects, click on amplify, and it's going to give me a sort of suggested effect of -1.9 because it wants to bring me down to where I'm exactly hitting the sort of the noise roof. I'm going to bring it down further than that. I'm going to bring it down an extra decibel below where it suggests I do. So I'm going to decrease the volume by 3 decibels, which means the new peak will be at -1. And there it is. As you can see, all of the volume is now maxing it out a little way below or a decibel, in fact, below maximum volume. This is going to make my podcast quieter than loud music. It's going to make it quieter than adverts. It's going to be, not making people jump. It's going to mean that any sort of music I slide in has a bit of a sort of a pump to it. And I'm going to be pretty happy with it. Now I'm going to unmute this track because this I have recorded at a relatively low volume, and I'm going to increase that volume. Instead of just straight amplifying it, which I could do, I'm going to compress it, which is going to bring it up to 0, and then I will de-amplify it from there. So I'm using the same compressor settings as before. Now this is already kind of partially compressed, again via Skype that I used, and via OBS, which I've used to record with, but I just want to do a bit more, especially because Windy, he loves to jump around with his volume, especially. He loves to shout the first word of a sentence and then mutter the rest, bless him. And again, you can see, quiet when I want it to be quiet, except for a few little bits here and there, loud when I want it to be loud. Now I'm about to do my listen through. It's currently at an hour and 5 minutes. I'm going to listen through it for an hour and 5 minutes, and there are going to be bits where we've talked over each other, and I don't want that to be in there. There's going to be bits where someone says something that they later regret, and I'm going to remove that. There's going to be bits where someone is coughing while someone else is speaking, and so if for example, right, all of this bit here, this is a Windy monologue on a young player, and I'm having a coughing fit this entire time. I don't think that's what this actually is, but that's an example of something it could be. I will select this bit and I will manually de-amplify this entire section to the maximum de-amplification of -50, and that will remove that bit from the track. It's really important that whenever I delete anything, right, if we go off topic here and we decide, oh no, remove that, or if someone asks a question that's naff and we go, oh, let's delete that, I've got to make sure that I delete from all of the tracks, in this case only 2, both tracks, the equal amount. Otherwise they fall out of sync, and I need to start doing things like copy pasting, blank bits of noise until we're up to till they match up again, which could be very fiddly and a big hassle. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight everything except for a couple of seconds of silence at the beginning, which is going to be helpful for inserting an intro later. I'm going to highlight all of this, and I'm going to truncate the silence. So again, we remember this was an hour and 5 to start with. So every time there is no sound, and we're counting no as anything below 30 decibels. So if there's a slight room hum, that's fine. This is especially effective because we applied a noise gate earlier. And anytime that goes on for more than 0.27 of a second, oh Jesus, anytime it's that much time, I'm going to bring it down to that much time, and that's going to take out all of the bits where no one says anything and there's an awkward silence, and it's going to help us sort of speed up, give us a bit more tempo to our podcast. Basically, I'm going to make sure I've left this unticked, because otherwise we end up interrupting each other the entire time. So now our podcast recording that was an hour and 5 minutes with all of the little bits of silence taken out is down to pretty much an hour flat. So now we've got a shorter podcast that's much punchier, no awkward silences. This is going to make editing slightly more fiddly, slightly more difficult. This is something I could maybe have saved for later. So if there's any bits where we start talking, someone's dog wants to go out, they go let them out, there was a brief period of silence, that silence is now gone, so it's harder to identify. The margin of error for where I'm deleting is decreased to 0.27 of a second, but I'd rather do it that way and make the listening portion of this job quicker to go through. I'm going to copy in our theme music. Just going to click and drag. Let me find that just to show you what that looks like. So here are my themes. So what I do is I've put them all on one track. So I've got our intro, that's this bit here. I've got our outro, that's this bit here. And I've got this bit, this is little theme cuts that we do either side of the ad break. And I'm going to essentially just make sure things line up. I'm going to copy and paste silence to make things line up. And I'm going to delete silence to make things line up, and that is it. It's just getting the timing right. I'm going to have some overlap between the end of the intro and the beginning of the host speaking. I'm going to have some overlap between the final words of the episode and the outro coming in. And yeah, that is how I at least edit a podcast.